Welcome to Dare to Innovate. Very excited for our session here today. With me, as always, I have Calero's CEO, Scott Gilbert. Scott, I'm going to remind you of the rules of this session is I get to ask the questions, you do not. We've had a few of these.
I understand the rules. I cannot promise to follow.
Again, I got to set out the groundwork first. With me, I'm very excited. We have two special guests that are very important to the Calero business as well as our customers and the market in general. So first, I'll start with Nicola Whiting, who runs one of our business units. Longtime employee and extreme experience in the mobility industry. So very excited to have Nicola here. Nicola, thank you for joining. And with us as well, we have Tom Krewoks, who runs our Managed Mobility Services organization. And Tom, very excited to have you here today as well. So Nicola, Tom, thank you for joining. Today, we're going to talk about managed mobility services, and I'm going to start off with the first question to Mr. Gilbert. And really, why are we talking about this, Scott?
Yeah, look, this is, I guess there's a number of reasons. First, this is a high growth area. Enterprises are adopting these services at a rate much, much more quickly than they have historically. For us, it's one of our largest growth areas. And the reason's pretty straightforward. Mobile devices continue to proliferate throughout enterprises. Now we're talking, not just the mobile phone, but your tablets, other purpose-built mobile devices, and they require a lot of service, activations, deactivations, all of the different things that encompass managed mobility services. And as those devices proliferate, enterprises realize that they're not equipped to handle and manage those services with their own internal teams. And so it's going to continue to grow. I think probably continue to accelerate growing as well. And so it's a pretty important topic.
So, Dare to Innovate, obviously the Innovate piece of the title is what we really want to talk about today. So Tom, what is innovative about the topic we're talking about today, which is, kind of global support within managed mobility?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So really, it's sort of moved away from folks having the specialists in-house that are doing the managed mobility, and they had moved to outsourcing those teams. So that's a little bit unique with respect to us. We've actually made a huge investment in bringing all mobility support in-house across the world to make sure that we're supporting customers on their time zones and 24 hours, 7 days a week. So really that's one piece of it. The second piece of it is the confluence of both the technology piece and our people. So really having the service in-house and having a best-in-class platform, we're able to drive a lot of automation and innovation through those solutions where we have both the technology and people that are supporting the customer through their mobility experience.
So Tom, one of the things that I found really interesting about what you said is that combination of technology and service. We have, some providers out there that are just service providers. We have some that have some tech as well. But Nicola, can you talk more about the importance of having that technology and service together, and how does that change the customer experience and customer satisfaction?
So I think it ties back a number of aspects together. We've talked about this in other sessions that we've done around the mobility topic. For me, the managed mobility concept drives inventory, so it enables you to control what you have within your estate, know exactly what you have at any moment in time. It lets you have a single view of the world. It gives you a single user experience through the use of technology across your entire global estate. So no matter where somebody is in the world, if they log into a piece of technology, their experience is the same. So it's always the same shopping cart experience. But it then feeds its way back down through the technology to inventory, which is the foundation of everything, that then ties back into the core concepts of, expense management in general.
So as usual, we've gone deep before we've kind of, kind of set out the groundwork to be able to go there. But it's been a good conversation. So let's step back for a second as we continue to educate our viewers and the market in general. Is when we think about talking about managed mobility services, Nicola, what's kind of the industry standard for mobility support?
It typically forms like two separate sections. So there's the procurement support. So that is how do we order devices on behalf of a user? And then there's the actual support function of it itself. So that's how do I get help with either a device I've just received, a device I've already got, how do I get it onto the UEM system? How do I get my corporate emails on it? So it's very multifaceted. But the core concepts are how do I get something new or change what I already have at a procurement level, and how do I then get support with what I've already got in my hand? So there's those kind of two primary core concepts, Andrew.
Scott, when we think about some of the decisions that Calero has made over the years in terms of providing support to our users, we've obviously always owned the technology, but we've done various different things around the actual people answering the phones and supporting the procurement orders. What's been the change that we've made over the last kind of 12 months? That's really an innovative approach or impacting our customers.
Yeah, this is an exciting one. I know you and I have spent years chatting about this, and the last 12 months is really when it happened. And that was we achieved a certain scale where when we looked at the customer experience that we wanted to provide, we could not use some of the typical third parties that we've used in the past. We also saw this industry trend where our competitors were offshoring these jobs. We're working on finding inexpensive labor offshore, and we heard the feedback pretty quickly from the customers that were with those providers that the quality of service was declining rapidly. So if you take the fact that we achieved a certain scale because of the growth we've experienced and the gap that existed in the market, the opportunity was right in front of us. And so taking all of those people and bringing them in house as Calero employees, as well as being onshore, whether that is a U.S. onshore, a U.K. onshore, whatever the country is where we need to have those people. And that was a massive project, right? I mean, that was a lot of great people involved. Nicola and Tom, obviously, two of the people that masterminded that. And it's just been incredible what it's doing for the customer experience. And so, when you talk about innovative, has a lot of different meanings. You can, onshoring and bringing people in house may not be seen as innovative, but when you take it in the context of it's the opposite of what a lot of our competition is doing, I think that's really where the innovation shines through in terms of that initiative.
So, Tom, let's start with you in terms of, Scott talked about kind of the overarching view of why we brought it in house. Or some of the decision points that we went through, but let's dive in a little bit deeper. And what were some of the key factors that we took into account when we said let's bring it in house?
Yeah. So Calero's culture is awesome, and that's just obviously I'm biased, but it really is. And getting folks in that are supporting the customer, that are a part of that culture. I mean, we're kind of a get it done sort of culture. There's a lot of support across the BUs. Nicola's, on here today. She supports me. Her team supports me super well, and my folks really, really well. And so aligning to the company culture, I think first and foremost is probably one of the biggest thing, and having that ownership collectively across the accounts that we service. I think the second thing is, and this is a little bit unique, rather than just having, a generic call center, a generic support center with, supervisors and things like that, we have account managers just on the BU side, your service operation manager and your director of service operations paired up, same with the mobility team, mirrored in the same way, where you have a named person that's managing your account. So you're not just shooting off your concerns to the abyss. You actually have a named person that's part of your actual service operation reviews and all of those sorts of things. So it's somebody that has stake in it, and we have that across the globe. Hong Kong, UK, US, East Coast, West Coast. We have that alignment. It's allowed us to really build a deep knowledge base and expertise in this space. So we've obviously been doing this for quite a long time, and we have a lot of talented folks. But being able to have that this function in-house, we've rapidly been able to increase our knowledge and expertise. And what that really means for the customers, we're able to drive best practices across. We're able to sort of be that trusted advisor because we're starting to really build that knowledge base out. So that's another big piece of it. And then as I mentioned earlier, because we have this a named person that you can actually it's not some let me speak to your manager and you get some random person. We're able to close that feedback loop super quick. So you're able to have someone, like I said, that's accountable, but also they're going to provide you that feedback. If you have concerns, they're going to be there with your service operations team to make sure that they're partnering up to understand what's going on and put together a plan to make sure that we're getting you the service, we're supporting your end users the way that you would expect. We're seeing that turn around into faster resolution. And our ability to be able to sort of support new scope, and we're constantly seeing new scope and expanding our service. So our ability to be flexible and pivot super quick, that's all the result of having things be in-house.
I would just add, Tom, I think to me on the service ops side, I think one of the biggest benefits that I've definitely seen is because there are people aligned to specific customer accounts, they have integral knowledge, which actually lets us advise our customers on opportunities where they can improve as well. So, for example, it might be that we have recommendations on how we've originally chosen to configure the application. We might want to educate them on how to train their staff internally in a different way. So that knowledge has definitely enabled us to become way more consultative in our approach around the managed mobility space. Like that to me has been one of the biggest game changers as part of doing this.
Yeah, so let's pull on that thread a little bit and talk about best practices that we've learned in terms of managed mobility. And Nicola, I'm going to start with you, and then Tom and Scott jump on in. So when we think about the best practices that we're seeing in supporting managed mobility in a global environment, what do those things look like to you, Nicola?
I think in some respects it's around having a singular experience. Like that to me is like the best thing that we can do for all of our customers, is that every employee, irrelevant of where they are on the globe, has one experience. We've also seen our ability to help our customers through using the technology better inform their users from the start. So we can cut down on the number of times they need to call a support desk if we can use the technology to make it simple enough to order a phone in the first place. So we've actually had a lot of conversations with customers about how can we help you dial down the noise over here by improving the experience over here. So those would probably be the two big things, I think, Andrew, is that single experience, irrelevant of where you are in the world. And I think the other big thing is expectation setting. I think we've done a really good job through the technology of driving end user expectation setting, whether it's you're going to get your device within 5 days, or whether it's this is out of stock. Like those very simple things actually make a massive difference to an end user's experience.
So Scott, one of the things that's always, I don't want to say plugged the MMS space, is that singular global experience. Because in global businesses, you have operating units and business units and everything decentralized. And when we think about best practices and user experience, that employee that just wants to get their mobile device to be able to do their job, how are we helping companies get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nicola answered it really well, which is when we see these global companies with, as you mentioned, in-country managers or in-region managers, the second thing we see associated with that is every region has a different process, because they were all designed by different people, implemented by different people. And when you talk about, destroying a customer experience and efficiency, it's by doing that. And so the first thing really comes in strong with Nicola and the rest of the teams is saying, look, let's standardize. Let's start with a standardized process, which is going to then help accelerate bringing additional countries, regions, areas on board. And that doesn't mean that there can't be any differences, right? But if you start with a standardized process and then just make small tweaks to it for a region, maybe it's a different approval process for this region, maybe it's a different procurement role, whatever that individual is, it's still starting off from that base process, which is then going to allow, again, that consistent user experience regardless of where they are. And look, that's the beauty of both having the internal teams as well as the technology to support that sort of thing.
So, Scott, let's step back for a little bit and look at this. We've obviously talked about some of the reasons why we decided to insource. Talk to me about some of the risks involved in organizations. Well, let's look at this in two ways. One, we're asking a customer to outsource to us. That's a piece of the pie that has risks involved with it for large scale companies, small medium businesses, whoever is deciding to outsource. And then when you layer on top of that someone else outsourcing to somebody else, you're multiple layers removed from control of that employee experience. Can you talk to me about some of the risks that you've run into across your career and seen in the space?
Yeah, look, the biggest risk that any company has when they're putting this in place, whether it's through an outsourcer or internal, is putting too many layers of people between that end user and that the person that can make anything happen, right? The escalation point and if you have multiple layers of people in between, and you set your processes up that way, you're gonna fail, right? You're gonna miss something in the user experience, and most often, large companies are going to roll this out in stages, and if you have that early failure, you are sinking the entire rest of the project. And so I think that's the biggest risk that people face. And again, part of the Calero business model overall, not just in management mobility, but across our entire organization, is to keep as few layers as possible between that end user and that escalation person who can make anything happen. I think the other big risk is believing that when you are making a change, whether that is from an internal team to an external team, is thinking that everything should just be copy and paste, right? The risk of saying, I'm just going to go recreate what I'm doing over here, and I'm going to do it over there instead. And, the risk there is that any process, any procedure, any team and time develops habits, some good, some bad. And if you move those bad habits over, you're not going to gain the advantage of making the change in the first place. So really the other risk is not taking a fresh look at the organization, the process, the procedure as you make a change. Again, whether it's from an internal team to a provider like Calero or from another provider to Calero.
I think it's important, Scott, to be focused on the outcomes that you want to achieve, because we see customers do this as they go through like a transition from A to B. I do this today, therefore I want to do this tomorrow. But when we actually stop and ask them, what do you want the outcome to be? We understand the journey, but what's the destination? As long as we can get them to clearly articulate the destination, we will develop the best journey for them. So as you go through a transition of this kind of ilk, always focus on what do you want the destination to be, and then we will help you develop the best journey and the mode of transport that you're going to take that journey in. But what's the destination? Like that would be the biggest piece of advice I would give anybody going through this sort of transition. And we encourage customers we constantly ask this question during implementation, but what's the destination? We understand you want to get there in a car, but what's the destination? Like, and that for me is like the biggest thing that makes any form of transition program successful is where are we going and why do we need to go there?
Nicola, one thing I just wanted to add on to that is like in that transition period, and we're going through it, right now with a customer. Like I love that we do this, and we sort of during that transition period, we have sort of this critical care time where we're having these multiple touch points to really get the customer comfortable to redress those sort of, hey, these are the outcomes you're looking for, to make sure that we're level setting and baselining for a shared understanding. And honestly, I've seen that be so powerful and help to overcome that fear curve that sort of inevitably occurs. And I'm just really proud of how we actually do that in partnership with the business units to make sure that the customer, hey, you just made a major sort of jump here, and totally we totally get it. And having those regular touch points, being really embedded and partnered up with them is so key to the success of the program overall. So I'm super proud that we do that.
Nicola, we've talked a lot about employee experience, which obviously is one of the key drivers of customer satisfaction and overall, program satisfaction. But when you step back and think about this at, kind of our program owner level, whether they're in the CIO or CFO or wherever they sit within the organization, when you think about mobility, what are some of the key factors besides employee experience that drive overall satisfaction?
I think the ability to manage the complexity that you see around the globe. So, when I think about vendors outside of North America, the further you go across the world, it gets more complex. Whether that's language restrictions that we see with certain vendors, whether that is they don't have portals, everything's done by email, everything has to be done in a certain language. So for me, the ability to manage the complexity is like a massive part of how you control the customer experience. So if you can control the complexity and manage within that very complex environment, and it's little things, not just language and not just how you place an order, but it's also how long things take to ship and stock availability, and the fact that one phone might be available in Canada but you can't get it in France. It varies so dramatically across the world. So having a provider that's nimble enough that in the background can deal with all of that complexity, like that to me is how you drive the front end experience.
Yeah, Nicola, I mean, you kind of you hit the other nail on the head with that, which is that knowledge is specialized, right? I mean, finding a company that understands the difference between how I procure a device in Japan versus South Africa versus New Zealand is critical. And none of our customers are in the business of procuring mobile phones, right? It's part of their larger business that they need to accomplish. And so it really does hammer home the need for these large enterprises, these complex enterprises, to find a provider that has that knowledge and let their users focus on what their job is instead of learning how to order the phone from Tokyo.
Yeah, I think Scott and Nicola, really interesting point on managing that complexity. Tom, it's one of the cruxes of why we need to control the resources, or an organization should control the resources that is providing these solutions. So, talk to us a little bit more about that, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, getting scaled up, going into where you have a small footprint, and being able to be competent and able to give that customer experience that you're expecting regardless of region, that is extremely complicated. Being able to get up resources quickly to have that expertise, I mean, that's one of the huge benefits of our in-house solution, is being able to get those resources there. They have that expertise, they have that knowledge, and we're able to get it up quite quickly. And we're seeing with customers, as their estate grows, they're going into these countries that they had historically struggled to really service, and where they had these really, really small footprint with really complex rules and all of those things that are actually blockers. And we're able to pick it up. We're able to advise them. And so that's been really a critical success factor for us in bringing the expertise in-house and owning the solution end to end.
Yeah, absolutely. So Scott, to kind of finish up and loop back to kind of where we started, or, in the beginning of the conversation, talking about, technology organizations like ourselves, either outsourcing, offshoring, or, managing the resources themselves. Let's go back to, the decision point and what made it innovative and why we're taking this approach.
Sure. I mean, it's really part of our overall long-term strategy across the entire business, not just within the realm of managed mobility. And that strategy has to do with the simple fact that we're not a monopoly. Customers have choices. There's lots of other providers out there, and when you're in that situation and you think about a company strategy, the question is, how are we going to differentiate? How are we going to be different than the others? And what we didn't want to pursue was a low cost, low quality differentiation strategy. Instead, we said we're going to provide a high quality, competitive cost solution, and that's really what we're driving home here with these changes, like bringing these resources internally, making additional investments in the technology piece of it. It's really around our overall strategy to be the highest quality provider in the space.
Well, that's a great point to close on, Scott. So thank you for that. Scott, as always, thanks for joining. Nicola, Tom, tremendous information today. To all the viewers out there, thank you for listening and watching, and looking forward to seeing you on the next Dare to Innovate. Thank you.
Stay on top of the conversation. Like and subscribe to our channel to get notified when our newest episodes release. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Dare to Innovate.